Hi everybody. So in this video we're going to look at using fluids to simulate steam or smoke. So in another scene we have a coffee cup that has coffee in it, and we are wanting to simulate a little bit of steam coming out of that. And so even though we have a lot of different simulation types here, we have Bifrost for simulating liquid, and end particles. We can simulate types of smoke and particle-based systems. For fluids, it actually is a really good way of simulating things like smoke, fire, explosions, steam, and anything that's sort of cloud or like volume based, right? So we're going to go to fluids and 3D container, and we're just going to create one of these just to start playing around with it. So by default, if I hit play in here, you're going to see it starts getting sort of like this, almost like a pixelated looking like steam, right? You can kind of see almost like some blockiness to it, right? Now again, if you're not familiar with doing simulation stuff, if I right click on my timeline, I'm going to want to set playback speed to play every frame max real time. The reason I do that is because to simulate anything, Maya needs to know what's happening on frame 29 before it can figure out what's happening on frame 30, right? And then frame 30 before it can figure out 31. So if it skips any of those frames, the simulation messes up, right? So if we have it set to that, then this is going to simulate pretty smoothly. Right. And I want to go ahead and extend my timeline out here a little bit more so we can see some more of what this stuff does after it starts to fill up. Now you'll notice that we have a box around a little point in the middle. Okay, and so that point is an emitter, and you'll see that emitter is parented underneath. This fluid emitter is emitting into this fluid box, right? And so wherever this box goes, or this fluid object goes, the emitter is going to go with it, right? But this fluid one is the actual shape of the fluid, and this is going to be a lot more of what renders the fluid. So this is using a voxel based system. So you know what a pixel is? A pixel is a bunch of points on a 2D surface, right? Like a JPEG or some sort of image. So a voxel is a volume pixel. Like, that's the way I like to think of it. So it's a pixel in 3D, right? So each of these little squares here sort of represents a cube of space inside of this volume, right? And that's why we're kind of seeing this look a little blocky inside of there, is because right now it's just a 10 by 10 by 10 box, right? So this there, 10 by 10 by 10. Well, if I change that to something like 50, now it's a 50 by 50 by 50 box, right? And so now we can see that a little bit better. And now this smoke is going to have a little bit more definition to it, right? It's also going to be a little bit slower on our machine or on our computer, right? But you're going to see that always has to stay within the size of this object, right? It's not going to go outside of it. So that seems a little problematic. We can actually do some neat stuff with that later, but I can still move it to the bottom of this if nothing else, and have it extend a little higher before it finally collides with that. Now, currently this is just emitting a bunch of volumed clouds into this area, and then it's going up to the top, colliding with the top, and sort of spewing out, right? And it's very linear. Like, there's not very much randomness going on here. I will point out that in this fluid shape, the higher this number goes, the way more taxing it's going to be on our computer. I mean, we can take it up to 100, and it's going to look great, but it's going to play really slow, right? So right now my computer is handling 50 pretty well. Yours may not, and so whatever it is, also consider how far away it's going to be. If it's going to be a little bitty matchstick that peters out, then it may not be worth using that much computer power to to calculate it. So again, back at 50 on mine, and I'm getting a pretty decent simulation. Okay. But again, very linear. It's a puff of smoke, and it all kind of happens similarly, right? So let's go ahead and go down here, and we'll start seeing some different things that we can change. Like we can change gravity, we can change viscosity, friction. There's a whole bunch of different things we can change there. One of the things I like doing though is this auto resize. So if I click that, what this is going to do is it's still going to keep that resolution from up there on the top, you know, the 50 by 50 by 50, but it's going to set a maximum, and then it's going to automatically resize this shape. And so now our smoke can go as high as we want it to. Right? It's just going to keep going and going and going until we sort of hit this max resolution. Right? Now if I go down a little bit further, we're going to start seeing content details. Okay, and if I open that up, there's a whole bunch of different stuff under here. Density, velocity, turbulence, temperature, fuel, color. Right? All of these are different things that we can change about this fluid effect and how it simulates, right? So first let's play with density. Density is kind of fun because I can sort of turn density up and down, make it, you know, thicker, or like is it a really wispy smoke, or is it, you know, really dense like a heavy fog, right? Now I will say that this is going to help a little bit of how we see it in our viewport, but when we render it, we're going to get a slightly different result. Buoyancy is interesting. It's more like, right now it's very buoyant and it's traveling upward, but if I lower that number, it's actually going to fall. Okay, so it's like, how heavy is this smoke, right? Let's go and put that back to 1. And then finally, dissipation is one that I like. It's how much it's going to sort of disappear over time, right? So smoke doesn't really last forever. It just kind of, you know, putters out. And so currently dissipation at its highest is 1, but I can actually turn that up higher than 1. I can type in 2, and it'll actually dissipate a little faster. So if you want it to sort of feel like it's dissolving, turning that up will actually keep our simulation playing a little bit more smoothly too, because it's not going to get too dense and be more than our computer can handle. So let's go ahead and put this up to 400 here, right? So we can do some interesting stuff with it, but again, it's still just sort of puffing it out, and then it's just floating up to the top. So we're going to go down here to turbulence and velocity, and that's where we're going to be able to start messing some stuff up a little bit. And this is where it can get fun, right? Because if I turn my turbulence strength up, you're going to start seeing a lot more wispiness, right? Like it's going to be all over the place. So I may not want that up that high. Maybe I'll turn it down a little bit more. Right? And then I can also turn my frequency up. And so that's going to be like, how noisy is that turbulence? Right? So I'll turn my dissipation down so it'll stay alive just a little longer, and we can start to see kind of what it's doing, right? So we're getting lots of like really interesting stuff happening now. We can turn this up and make it really, really noisy. I can turn my frequency down, and that's going to keep it sort of bigger wisps of smoke. The higher the frequency, the sort of the more small the wisps are. And then speed is something I think we could also turn down if we want it to be a little less like crazy at the beginning. I'm going to turn it up so we get, there we go. So all of this is stuff that we can control to start getting a pretty interesting simulation of sort of a smoky, wispy object, right? Now velocity is how quickly it's moving. We can also add a little bit of swirl to it if we wanted to. So you're starting to get some different things here. And even a little bit of noise if we want to randomize that a little bit. And so from that, we're getting some really interesting stuff, right? Now, I'm going to go down here a little bit lower. Now I'm going to talk just a minute about temperature and fuel. We're not really going to deal too much with it right now, but this is a way of controlling sort of how something, like basically what happens is we have these little 3D boxes in here, right? And as one fills with smoke, it sort of contaminates the next one and fills it with smoke, and then and that's what we're getting, is just sort of the simulation of this thing filling with different voxels. All the voxels just changing, right? So temperature is a lot about, and fuel is a lot about how that contaminates and transfers from voxel to voxel. So this can be really handy when you're trying to make something look like an explosion that turns into black smoke, which turns into more of a gray smoke. And so using fuel, you can have your fuel burn out after so much time. And so this is what this is for. It's a lot of stuff going on here, so I'm not going to mess around with that too much right now. What we are going to look at is shading. Shading is kind of neat. So to really deal with shading, we're going to have to start seeing this thing rendered. So let's go ahead and do an Arnold render view, and of course we're going to get absolutely nothing because there's no lights in here, right? But if I were to do a light, like a sky dome light, we're going to start getting a pretty nice render in here, right? Now, the interesting thing about that is a sky dome light gives me this, but if I were to put different lights in here, I may get a completely different result. And you'll see that it's not exactly the same thing that I'm getting on my in my viewport either, right? This is still a little different, like it's a little wispier, whereas this is a little denser. So you're going to need to render this stuff to get your actual, what this actual render looks like, right? Or what this actual simulation looks like. But I can adjust like transparency. I can make it really thick, it's all the way out to the edge of the voxels, or I can start, getting much more wispy by taking this transparency down. And again, this is going to be really heavily influenced by your lighting in your scene, other objects that are behind it, things like that. Now we can also play around with color, and this is where we can get some fun stuff. Right now my color is just white, right? And you'll see that I have like this gradient here, but currently it's just white. So if I click on that white color, I can change it to any color I want, and I can make me some blue smoke, or some light blue smoke, or some green smoke, right? And that's cool. Now, if I click out here somewhere else, I get a second little green dot, and click it, double click here, and I could go from, let's say, green to purple. But you're seeing that green to purple isn't working so well. It's green to orange, looks like. Yeah, maybe. Green to red's a little harsh. How about that? Green to blue. So the problem with that is we're not actually seeing that transition happen. It's still just solid blue, right? So that's because my color input is set to constant. So really what we're telling this is it's going to be sometimes green and sometimes blue, but what is going to decide that? And so right now it's constant, but we could say I want it to be based off of the Y gradient, which basically means the more vertical it is in this scene, the more green it becomes, right? Or my X gradient, right? Was green to blue from left to right. I can do a center gradient where it sort of starts blue in the center and goes out to green. Or I could do it based off of density. And basically the denser parts of the volumes, right? Like the denser part of the voxels will be one color. And then, so you'll see like where it's really dense, where it's being emitted, is blue, and then it goes out to green. And if we have it in density, I can shift my bias and kind of push out some of that blue into the green. And I can also shift the points where this is at, so I can make that like a faster transition, right? Or even add a third point out here and make it something crazy like red. And see if we can get some like red in the very center of this that goes out to green, right? And this is something that we have full control over. The interesting thing is we don't just have to map a color into it. We could also map a texture into it if we wanted to. So if this green, if I wanted to map something in like a fractal, it's going to, have some sort of texture to the voxels as well. So again, that's kind of getting a little more complicated than I want to get into this. But so you can see we have a lot of control over what we want this to look like. And there we go. And we can really shift around and play with what this final render is going to look like too, right? Now, this is still going to simulate like the voxel it is, right? And we're going to be able to see the different results. So, the cool thing about this is once we're done, this renders really nice. I mean, like look how pretty that is. Like that's just, it looks very realistic. Right? So let's go in here and look at our coffee cup. So open scene. And what I'm going to use is this one. Open. Don't save. So I have this simulation where my cereal box pours some cereal into the bowl. I don't know what's happening there. Apparently I made some changes to something. I'll work that out later. So what we need to do... Oh, I made changes to the animation. It's using an old... don't worry about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hide that cereal stuff so it just doesn't mess you up. It's using a different cache, so don't worry about that too much. And let's see, it's the instancer, Control H. So what I really want to worry about is what this looks like in here. So I really want just a little bit of steam coming out of the top of my coffee cup. Now, as we have been doing this, we've just been creating a fluid container, for a 3D fluid container, and that container has been emitting smoke, right? And that's cool. That's what we want. Actually, I want to go ahead and go to 0 here, or go to frame 1 here, so it'll start simulating normally, right? Now, what I want to try though is I want to try having something else emit the steam, because we can actually emit from an object. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate my coffee here. Control D, and again you'll see it's just a cylinder, right? And I didn't need anything more than that because my coffee isn't going to be like sloshing around anywhere. It's just sitting in my cup steaming, right? So what I would like is for the very top of this to be emitting smoke or steam, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of these other faces except for the top. Try this again. Face. Right. Hit delete. Okay. Okay. So currently, this is my fluid object, and the emitter is what is emitting, right? But if I want I'm just going to... Okay. So if I wanted this to, if I want the top of this to emit, what I really need is I need it to be within inside of my fluid object, right? So this has to sort of fall within it, right? Now currently my emitter is what is emitting, so I'm going to delete that, right? And now if I hit play, nothing is happening, right? Nothing is emitting, right? So if I grab my fluid and my cylinder and I go to fluids and add edit content and say emit from object, now what we're going to get is a new emitter, and that cylinder is going to be what emits. Okay, so this is pretty cool. This is just going to allow the cylinder to emit some steam out of my coffee cup over time, right? So let's go ahead and get this back to where it belongs now. So I want this to be back on top of my coffee cup here again, right? So I grab the, and I think this is also interesting. If I hit Control H, it will still emit even though we can't see it. Right? So so I want this back where it started. So I'll select my little coffee top, select the original coffee, and we're going to use this new tool that's in Maya, Match Transformations. I'm just going to say Match All Transformations, and it'll just sort of snap it back down there to where it belongs. Okay. Again, that's the That P cylinder 2 is our object, but where is it? P cylinder 3 is the emitter, right? And so I also want this box here to be in the same location. So I'll do that again with the fluid and P cylinder 3. Modify match transformations. I probably don't want to match all. I'm just going to go modify match translations. Yeah, that looks right. And so now it's in the same location, right? And then I can actually hide this top P cylinder, and it's just going to look like it's coming off the top of my cup, right? So again, I want this to automatically dynamically resize, right? So I'm going to select my fluid, my attribute editor, and down here auto resize. So now we should get this cup sort of simulating like this. Now again, we don't have to do this. You could actually still have just left that emitter, but this is totally nuclear coffee we got going on here. But this allows us to emit from a shape a little bit, right? I can also change my resolution up to 50. We're going to get a little bit more. Right. So my coffee is really steaming. And from here, we're just going to start playing around with some of this simulation, right? So we can go to let's go to content details. Under density, I'm going to take that density way down. It's way too much steam. But again, really, before I can tell, I just need to see what my render looks like. So let's go and get a render in here. Obviously, I need some more. Lights in the scene. I should have fixed this first. So let's go ahead and just crank up the intensity of my lights a little bit. And so I will go back here, turn up exposure, Arnold render view. So our scene's getting a little brighter now. Would probably also maybe scale this just a little bit more, just a little bit bigger. Go ahead and put this at a 1.2. This may be too much now. Yeah, maybe a little much, but we should be able to see our steam a little bit better now. There we go. So we can start to see what this is looking like, and it looks like we got this nasty brown smoke coming out of our coffee, right? So we need to start playing around with this so we get a better render out of that. So again, my density is going to help, but it's not going to solve everything. In fact, it doesn't really seem to do a ton in terms of our render. I'm also going to turn my buoyancy really high up, so it's going to kind of puff up out of the coffee a little faster. I'll go ahead and get a little further along in this so we can start seeing what this render looks like. So again, that's way dense, right? So I know I want my dissipation to be really high. Let's go ahead and put that up to something like 3. Okay. And under my turbulence, I'm going to put just a little bit of turbulence on it, a little bit of frequency. Let's see what that starts to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down so it'll simulate a little faster, and then we can render it again if we want to, right? So we're getting a little bit of steam out of there now. Is that dissipation too high now? Let's try 2. So now we're getting a lot of steam coming off of it. Let's pause there and do a render and see what that looks like. So maybe not even showing up enough. Maybe take dissipation number 1, go back to the beginning, simulate some more. Go and close that. So even though it's looking kind of big here, how's it looking in our render? Okay, not bad. So again, this is finish rendering. This is going to give us a little bit of that, but again, it's still kind of brown, like it's kind of a gray smoke. So I'm going to go down here to my surface. I'm sorry, not surface. It's under shading, right? And currently my transparency is going to be part of that. So if I turn transparency all the way up, you're going to see some crazy stuff. You can start playing around with transparency, but I'm really not wanting to change that too much. What I'm actually wanting is this white color just isn't white enough. So if I click on that, you'll see that my value is from, black is 0, white is 1. And you would think, well, you can't get whiter than white, but you really can. Like if this is a value, then I can just type in a higher number than 1. Like if I type in 2, we're going to start getting a little bit of a brighter steam, right? And so it's almost like it's glowing. It's not exactly like it's glowing, but it's almost like that. I can let's see. Yeah. So we also have some interesting stuff with opacity here. So currently my opacity is going to go from is going to be based off of density, and it's going to go from fully viewable to fully transparent. But we can kind of play around with this a little bit and get it thicker in some areas and thinner in others. So I mean, there's a lot of different stuff I can do with this to just start seeing what results I'm getting that I like. So let's pretend this is what I like, and if I hit play, we'll sort of see a little bit more of this simulation. And so it's really just getting a little bit of steam that's kind of coming off my coffee, and it's coming in kind of a wisp there too. So we can adjust all of those things like over time and start getting different results. But again, all of this is going to be heavily based off of what our render looks like. Right now, just like particles, Maya has to know what's happening on frame 160 to know what's happening on 161, right? And so if I just skip around through here and start clicking on different buttons, you're going to see it's going to start going haywire quick, right? We're going to get bad results in there, right? Because it doesn't know what's happening on each frame. Well, that's kind of what happens when we render. And so unless I have this all sort of solidified and sort of finalized, then when I render, it's really going to mess some stuff up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cache this out. Okay. So again, I'm just going to grab the fluid object. I'm going to go to in cache. So even though this isn't a nucleus object, this is still where the in cache is, or this is still where the cache is located. Create new cache, and you'll see Maya fluid is right there. So I'm going to click that. I'll say auto rename. And there we go. I'm getting some steam coming out of it. You have to do this before you render, or it's going to be a disaster. So trust me on this. And then once we get that done, I can sort of scrub again through my timeline, and I should be able to see this happening. So, or I should be able to see this in every frame and scrub back and forth. So let's see how that looked. So yeah, if I scrub here, you'll see that I'm able to see these really subtle wisps coming off my coffee. All right. So hopefully this makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions on the way, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.